Anytime we have a meaningful goal, there is always a risk that we'll become overwhelmed by it. I think that's normal. We want to set goals that challenge us and stretch us. We want to push ourselves right up to that line of what we're capable of, but somehow not cross over that line. So today, I want to talk about some of the strategies that I use to manage that balance so I don't get overwhelmed by my work. And these are a mix of some really simple tactical strategies, along with a few beliefs and mindset shifts that I've learned to create over the years. By the way, if you don't know me, I'm Kyle Greenfield and I run thejoywithin.org, where I help business owners manage the mental load of running a business. I've been an entrepreneur for nearly 20 years now, and all of the frameworks and strategies that I share are tools I use, ways of thinking I have had to learn in order to deal with all of the stress and mental blocks that come up along the way. So sit back, enjoy, and take whatever aspects resonate with you. Welcome to The Joy Within. I'm Kyle Greenfield, and I believe that you have the ability to become calm, confident, and happy anytime that you choose. Some days, that's easier than others, but with the right tools and the right way of thinking, we can unlock incredible states of joy, peace, and well-being within us. So visit thejoywithin.org to get started today, so that together we can create a happier and more peaceful world. So the first idea I want to share with you today is, I think, the most difficult to implement. But I think it's important because it provides a nice frame that each of the other tactics will fit into. Basically, it's about knowing your limits and learning when to throttle back. I think of this as being the line between excitement and overwhelm. I'm sure you've had that feeling of being revved up for something. Ideas are flowing, you're incredibly excited, and it feels like you're just on top of the world. And then, out of nowhere, something flips and you feel overwhelmed. That great idea that you just had starts to stress you out, and the brilliant plan starts to look unrealistic. And for me, there's often a sense of, oh shit, now I have to do all of this. Like it was fun when I was just thinking about it, but now it gets real. And that switch can happen very, very quickly. It's like you take things one step too far, and all of a sudden, the thrill and the excitement just become overwhelming. That's what I mean when I talk about crossing that line. It just flips. I don't want to get too much into why this happens today. It has to do with the different set of beliefs that we have activated in that moment. But I do want to talk about how to manage this state, because I think one of the biggest skills that will keep us from feeling overwhelmed is to know our own patterns. If you can identify common threads of when you flip into that feeling of overwhelm, then you can learn to catch yourself before you cross over that line. Now, I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't want to hear this, and I'm the same way, because practically speaking, it means that we have to throttle ourselves back. And I know for me that whenever I'm feeling in the zone, I never want to hold myself back. I never want to turn it down. But I have learned that it is more important for me not to cross over that line, not to risk crashing, than it is to eke out that last drop of inspiration and drive that's been flooding into me in the last few minutes. And I've learned to think of this in terms of risk. It is more important to hedge, to back off a bit, to protect the downside, than to keep rushing forward and risk crashing. Because if you cross that line, you could easily crash and lose an hour or two, or maybe even the whole day, because it takes you that long to recover. So you have to know how to identify when you are close to that breaking point, and train yourself to stop deliberately before you get there. And while there are some tactics to help with this, I think that most important, it's the mindset shift that matters here. You are your most important asset, and you have to protect your energy intentionally in a way that serves you best in the long run. You are running a marathon, not a sprint, and I think you have to let that sink in before the more specific tactics I'll share will work. Because all of the other strategies I find most helpful here basically come down to focus. I find when I am deliberate about the choices I am making and centered in my actions, I do not feel overwhelmed. I have found that one of the most important things I can do is to choose one, and only one, project to work on at a time. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have a dozen other tasks that I have to do. It means I have only one core focus that gets the majority of my time. That might be for a couple of days, or it might be for an entire quarter, depending on what I'm working on. But I can only move one ball forward at a time. And everything else has to be in basically maintenance mode while I do that. So you might have some tasks to do. You might have to keep the engine humming, but they're not the priority. And this is tough because it means letting some fires burn. And it also means you will miss opportunities that you could have pursued. But the opportunity cost is greater when we try to take on too much, because we don't end up doing any one thing long enough in order to break through. This is a lesson that I've had to learn many, many times over the years, but it is so important because in addition to the peace of mind it brings when you have that one point of focus, it also forces you to find deep clarity on what really matters and why. It also paves the way for the next tactic, which is that I like to keep large chunks of my calendar open. So usually I have 4 days a week when I have absolutely nothing scheduled before noon. This gives me a solid 5 or 6 hours in the morning to focus on what matters. It frees me up to be able to enter into a deeper state of focus, a more centered state, because I've already decided that during that time, I'm not checking email, I'm not jumping on a call, I'm not dealing with all of the mini crises that come up. I'm doing the thing that I have decided will move the ball forward. And often, when I say this to people, they will inevitably say something like, "Oh, well, you're so lucky. That would never work for me." And I'm always like, well, no, this didn't just happen. I mean, I designed my schedule this way. It's a decision. It's a choice. And I believe that if you do not make that time, if you do not treat it as sacred, then you'll never break out of the stress spiral. And I mean, okay, maybe you can't find 5 hours, at least not at first, but you can probably find 2, or at a minimum 1. Because I guarantee you that once you make this shift, that 1 hour will be the most productive time of your day. So if you do not find it and prioritize it and protect it, you will just jump from stress to stress to stress because you never get ahead on what really matters. And that's what leads either to burnout or to that feeling of, wait, what happened last month? Because you never end up making the progress that you need to. So you have to be deliberate about this. And that leads us into the next 2 points. Number 4 is what I call my wish list versus my task list. I try to be brutal about what I consider to be absolutely necessary. It is so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that we can do it all, and that it all has to be done today or this week. And it is easy to have 1,000 must-do tasks, when in reality, almost none of them actually need to be done today. Again, I am brutal about this. If it is not an existential threat to my business, it is not on my task list. I put it on what I call my wish list. Now, to be clear, I'm not actually talking about not doing the task. I'm talking about the framing of how I think about the task. I have found that there is an enormous psychological shift that happens when something becomes a want to do rather than a must do. I mean, maybe it's my inner teenager still rebelling against authority, but for me this really works. When I have to do something, I tend to resist it. It becomes a bigger deal than it is. I'm more likely to procrastinate, and I'm way more likely to stress myself out about it. So I try to keep the have-tos to a minimum. I find it incredibly liberating to mentally reframe the exact same task, the exact same action, to something that I want to do, to a thought of, wouldn't it be nice if? And then it automatically shifts the way that I approach that action. It feels lighter. It feels more like play. And it becomes a game to see how many of these things that I want to do that I can actually get done today. Rather than stressing myself out all day long because my task list is a mile long, and then beating myself up later that day when I inevitably do not get through it. So I encourage you to try that. Try creating a wish list instead of a task list. Number 5 is kind of a similar idea, but it's for bigger, longer-term projects. And it's actually something that I took from the Agile programming method. Basically, in Agile programming, you start with lots of wish list type ideas for features that you want to build for the product. And at the start of each build cycle, whether that's 2 weeks or a month or a quarter or whatever, you choose the most important features that can be built in that time. And if you get halfway through the period and you realize that it's taking longer than you had anticipated, then you have to scale back the feature requirements in order to fit into the time that you have. So you don't miss the deadline. Instead, you adapt the project to fit the time that you have. and you delay any other aspects of that feature that aren't strictly necessary. We can apply the same principle to any type of project that we set for ourselves. If it isn't realistic, we have to change the game. And I find this helpful because I, like most business owners, I think, am often very overly optimistic about what I think I can get done in a given time frame. And thinking in this way of scaling the scope of a project up or down, depending on the time that I have, and then readjusting that scope as I go forward and hit snags along the way, or sometimes maybe get an unexpected easy win. But readjusting my expectations according to what is happening helps to keep me more centered, so I don't start beating myself up for not being further along than I am. It helps me not to overwhelm myself trying to do something I simply do not have time to do. If you're dealing with stress and negativity in your life, the Joy Within can help. Our membership program provides a clear path to reduce stress and cultivate more joy in your life by showing you how to get out of your own way. When we learn to quiet that annoying little voice in our head, we allow a natural sense of joy, peace, and well-being to shine from within. Our program activates that joy within you by combining clear insights and simple actions with personal accountability and a plan that we customize to work for you. Best of all, it's free to get started. So head over to thejoywithin.org/join to sign up today. That's thejoywithin.org/join. Now, back to the show. Now, when I talk about reducing overwhelm in this way, it is easy to interpret this as arguing that we need to go easy on ourselves. Because, in a sense, I am saying that. But I don't mean it in a way of lowering our standards or scaling back the goals that we set. I mean it in terms of the psychological framing that we use. I'm operating on the assumption that if you are listening to this, you're probably already fairly driven. You want to reach your goals. And it's the way that we think about our progress towards our goals that ultimately keeps us in step with them. So these strategies are about managing that mental framing, the inner stories that you tell yourself along the way. And I've found that the better I am at managing my internal state, the more productive I become. So please don't think I'm suggesting you should just keep lowering your standards until you're not stressed out. Just give up on all your projects. Because it's actually the opposite. When you aren't stressed, you will naturally reach for a higher level of excellence. We just have to get out of our own way in the process. So, last two techniques. Number 6 is really easy, but really, really powerful. Something I call segment intending, and I stole that phrase from Abraham Hicks. But the idea is simply to take 1 or 2 minutes to set a clear intention before you begin any new task. You can go through a quick visualization or center and just breathe for a minute. And remember your goal for the next half hour or whatever time frame you're talking about. So, for example, I do this right before every single call that I get on. I did it right before I started recording this podcast. At least 5 or 6 times a day I do this. I step back and I reset. I think about what I'm about to do to help me focus, help keep out all of the other things that I could be doing, which reduces that overwhelm, and I'm able to center and get in the zone more easily. And the last tactic that I use in order to help keep me from feeling overwhelmed each week is I deliberately take on less work than I think that I can at any given time. I limit the number of clients I work with. I've already said that I only focus on one big project at a time. And I am brutal about cutting my task list. And again, this is because I know that I tend to be overly optimistic about how much time things will take. And so I've learned to build in extra flexibility. It's that same concept that threads underneath everything that I'm sharing here today. I want to be in the position where I do things because I want to, because I'm excited about them, because they feel right, not because I just have to get them done. And again, this has nothing to do with what your goals actually are. You could scale this approach up or down to whatever level of intensity that you want to have in your work. I'm not fundamentally talking about time logged. I'm talking about skills for the way you approach that time. So you can start to stack the odds in your favor that you'll be able to get the most mental leverage from the time that you put in. Because you begin to feel like you are constantly getting ahead, not always falling behind. Feeling ahead of it will drive you. It will propel you forward. It gives you more energy. Feeling like you're always on the back foot drains you. It weighs on you. and it leads you down that spiral towards stress and burnout. So whatever you can do to rig the game in your favor, to always feel on top of everything, will help you, because you will dramatically increase your chance of success. And you will feel more excited and more fulfilled every step along the way, which is a wonderful state to be in. That's the only way that I've found to have big goals and to be able to stick with them for the long haul, because I don't get overwhelmed. I feel excited and inspired. And the more I can stay in those states, the better off I am. So thank you so much for your time here today. I hope you found these strategies helpful. If you need help applying these principles to your life, you can head over to thejoywithin.org and book a one-on-one call with me this week. Or you can download our free 5-step guide to managing stress as an entrepreneur. That's at thejoywithin.org/5steps. And I'll include a link below as well. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with a friend. Know that I love you and I appreciate you wherever you are, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to The Joy Within. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do what you can to spread the word. I believe that we all deserve to feel calm, confident, and happy literally every single day. But with everything that's going on in the world, we need to work together to remind ourselves of that in as many little ways as we can. So please, pass this along to the people you care about. Email a friend, share it on social, do whatever feels right for you, so that hopefully, together, we can create a little more peace in our crazy modern world.